Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com. This video is another in my practice session series for the EX342 Red Hat Certified Specialist in Linux Diagnostics and Troubleshooting exam. Before I dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching, if you haven't subscribed, to click the subscribe button and ring the bell when you do. Also, a reminder that these are my practice sessions for the exam. My exam's just under 3 weeks away, and so I'm going through all of the posted objectives from Red Hat and trying to either explain the concept behind the objective or do some exercises related to the objective. And at the end of the video, I'll do a little self-assessment. Hopefully I'll feel confident. If not, I have a couple of weeks to do some knowledge gap filling and do a little bit of brushing up before the exam. That being said, these should not be considered tutorials, nor should they be considered authoritative information, since I myself am still learning, but I put these out on the internet in hopes that those that are also preparing for the exam, you might see some of the things that I practice, and it might give you some ideas of ways of creating some exercises for yourself to use with your preparation. So continuing with the understand and employ general methods of troubleshooting set of objectives, we're going to look at the monitoring or monitor systems for vital characteristics. It seems like I can't go through a Red Hat certification exam without critiquing some of the objectives just a bit, just because I like, the objectives don't necessarily need to be, you need to memorize these specific things to do well in the exam, but it helps to understand, what Red Hat is actually looking for in the objectives. And this monitor system for vital characteristics is a fairly broad thing. So there's a couple of tools I'm going to talk about with this. I might end up splitting this into a couple of practice sessions in case the video gets long. But the idea of what is considered a vital characteristic is subjective. I mean, there are some things that I think all system administrators would agree on are vital things about a system. But in the idea of trying to figure out, all right, what do I need to prepare for this exam? It can be a bit subjective. So I think considering that Red Hat is pushing the Cockpit interface a decent bit, if you look at documentation with RHEL 8 and RHEL 9, it talks about the managing systems using the web interface. That'll be one of the first things that I talk about. So let me open a terminal, and we're going to go into do lab server 1. So, and let's take a look and see. I think Cockpit comes installed by default, and probably so, since there's a MOTD that says, hey, enable Cockpit to see your stuff. But I could do RPM QA grep Cockpit. All right, so it has some of the basic modules with Cockpit. So we're used to it was a service for Cockpit, but we're actually going to start a socket that will eventually start the service. So we'll enable now Cockpit.socket. Let me become root. I don't feel like doing sudo over and over again for this. Okay. Now, by default, it listens on port 9090. It should be, it's listening there. I think also by default, Firewall D has it as a service, and it allows traffic for Cockpit 9090. So let's go to the browser and let's see what we can see here. For one, ejslab.com 9090. And we're going to get a warning because this is using a self-signed cert, and that is okay. I'm going to log in as just my regular user. And you can see a decent bit of stuff here. Can generally see stuff that's in journal CTL, which I may need to see. I'm already in privileged access. When you first go into Cockpit, you can click this administrative access to and become root. But you can get some interesting information, information about your storage volumes. I use this, or what I'm trying to do with the current hypervisor I have. I'm running, KVM on Fedora 40. I'll go to 41 at some point. But what I tried to do was give it a spin of just using Cockpit to manage virtual machines and such, because that's what RHEL documentation is kind of moving you toward. rather than using Vert Manager. Both are good tools, but it's something that I tried to do for that. So we see Cockpit is going. I'm going to install a couple of things. And actually, let's do a DNF search. Cockpit. You'll see a couple of other things that we can do with this. The Cockpit machines is the piece that allows you to kind of manage KVM and such. We're going to install a couple of things. One is Cockpit PCP, and this is going to be used for collecting performance metrics. Because one of the things I interpret this this objective as meaning monitor systems for vital characteristics is doing things that allow you to look at your system and say, hey, system's running terrible right now. Are we chewing up a bunch of RAM? Are we chewing up a bunch of CPU or disk IO, and on and on and on? And this is something that you can visualize this within Cockpit. I'm also going to install the session recording. The idea here is, if you're monitoring your system, let's say the user is breaking something, and the session recording can give you a way of seeing, like what is the user doing on the command line that ultimately breaks machine. Is actually a pretty nifty feature that's just built into this. So I'll demonstrate that as well. Some of these others I haven't touched before, like Cockpit Composer GUI for use with Cockpit. Not 100% sure what that is. But anyway, so we're going to install Cockpit. I'm actually not going to install Cockpit machines because I'm obviously not managing virtual machines here, but we'll do the session recording as well. If I can spell and speak at the same time. A lot of times I don't do -y. I like seeing everything it's going to install, but for this, I know that I want all this stuff. All right, so that has installed all of the stuff. I am going to log out and back into Cockpit. Let's see what's available to us now. See, session recording has appeared. And what I'm going to do, go back to Overview. And we're going to look at View Metrics and History. And this shows you, current CPU and RAM usage. But notice it talks about it can't load a history. The PM logger service, which is really a part of that PCP bit that I installed, needs to be running for it to be able to have historical information. So let us go ahead, start and enable that service. I encourage you working with services, preparing for this exam and any Red Hat exam, get in the habit of, enabling your services, because I'm pretty sure it's put in the objectives for this exam, but basically everything you do needs to be able to survive reboots, because I'm fairly sure the way that they do the grading of the environments is they reboot your virtual machines, because of course we're not going to be doing stuff on or I would think that I have not touched a physical machine during my exams, or I would at least be aware of it if I did. But anyway, they'll reboot the VMs and then probably run whatever grading script they have and make sure your configs are there. So always be prepared. So we'll enable PM logger, not Luger, logger.service. And you actually saw in the background it changed no data available. Now, what I did do a few days ago on one of my other little lab servers, I installed PM Logger and got it going, or installed the PCP bits and got it going. And let's take a look and see. There's not going to be a lot of traffic on that, probably hardly any at all. But let's see if we have some historical information to look at. And so this is where that limited access and administrative access, I want to become, it just gave it to me. Wasn't sure if I would have to authenticate again. So let's look at the view metrics and history here and see what kind of historical information we have. Again, it's not going to be a whole lot of stuff going on, but this is kind of nifty. So looking at memory, see if I can click some of these things. Let's do yesterday, Saturday. So yeah, there's not going to be much with this. There's a little bit of CPU, like the tiniest bit of CPU usage. It's not showing any network usage or disk IO, but that's how you can see some historical data. See what load earlier data does for us. At work, we have other tools for monitoring system performance, so this isn't something that I've done a whole lot with, but it's nifty that it's there. And if, let's say, you're in an environment where you can't pay for other types of tools, this is a way to be able to have that. And I think you can actually look at, you can add other hosts and such to your Cockpit environment for it, because I'm fairly sure this is going to reach out over SSH and get information. I may be wrong with that, and I probably am. I'm sure you can put stuff in the comments about it. I wish I could somehow zoom in on this, select an hour or something and see the information, but oh well. At the most, I think on the exam, thinking about like what could be feasibly graded is checking to see if that PM log, if the package is installed for this, and if PM logger is running and set to enabled. But this is one way of monitoring some of your stuff. I did want to show off the session host monitoring. So let me go back to the original lab server 1, and a couple of things that it would have installed. See if it shows it here. Yeah, installed tlog. I think this is what's actually running in the background, terminal logging session for this. But to configure this, and you should be able to configure this via the command line as well, but it's one of these things to get through the exam, especially with all the stuff you might have to try to keep in your head. It may just be easier to handle this in the GUI. But what I am going to do is make me a new user. Or I don't have to do that. I'll just use my aide user for this. So to get the session recording going, there's actually a couple of things to configure. One is the session recording itself. This notice is what will be shown as an MOTD about this. Generally, this is going to be written to journal D. And I'm going to click I want to see user's input. So we'll save that piece. The UI is not terribly intuitive here. I saved it, and that actually did save something. This uses SSSD from an permissions and authentication perspective. So we're going to choose some, and we're going to say the aide user. So again, I click save. It doesn't look like anything happened, but it did. And what this would have done, on lab server 1, if I were to go into SSSD confd, creates an SSSD configuration file for this particular this particular application. So let me log out, not log out, but log out. Do it again, and let's SSH back into it, and we should have the attention your session is being recorded. So we'll run a couple of commands. Let's say that I tried to look at what the IP address is, and I tried to install mutt. And then of course it complains because I'm not root, and I say, hey, I can't install mutt. So I'm going to log out now. So what I, as the administrator, can do, can go into this session recordings. I'm actually going to refresh my browser page here, and we see a session for me. Click that session recording, and this is really kind of the cool thing. The logs view shows in text what was actually what was done, right? Recording info. I think you can download this as well. Not 100% sure on that, but we can start the recording. Maybe this will make this, you can see what was shown. Not sure how well this is going to, there we go, I can zoom in some. All right, so we're going to pause. We're going to go back if I can. We'll just let it go to the end. Oh, there it goes. Starts at the beginning. And so you see, this is the input that I put. That's what came out from IP show. And then you'll see where I try to install mutt, and me as the user, I get this complaint that, hey, I can't install it. And then I, as the administrator, can say, well, it's because you're not root, just like the error message told you. But this is a pretty nifty thing to have just available as a part of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Cockpit and such. There is a way to export this recording to another system. Basically, you would gather it, you get it out of the systemd journal and export it. That I can't remember off the top of my head how to do that. I might practice that a couple of times between now and the exam, because it seems like something that might be kind of a low-hanging fruit of an objective to take a recording and then ship it somewhere. So that will be something that I look up to familiarize myself with. And again, I can see that as the monitor piece of this. Now, other things, let's see how long my video is now. Coming up on about 20 minutes, which of course it's a little shorter when I actually upload it, because I edit out some of the pauses and such. Another tool I guess I can look at in this session is it's like a tool I know of. I've used a little bit, but I'm not super familiar with it. So it'll be something that will get some attention between now and the middle of December 2024 when I take my test. But that's something called the SAR tool. And it's a part of the system utilities, or sys utilities, or systat. That's the name of the let me turn off session recording. And that's another thing. I really need to familiarize myself with setting this up via the command line versus just relying on Cockpit to do it. Cockpit is a valid way of doing this, but never hurts to know a couple of ways of doing some of the same things. I'm going to turn off the session recording. So that will become none. I think that's really all I need to do is basically tell SSSD, hey, we're not doing this anymore. All right, so let's log back in and see what happens. Yeah, so I don't have the MOTD anymore. So let's install systat. Might actually already be installed. One of the things for the exam, even though I didn't do this just now, but sometimes it's worth doing RPM QA real quick to see if something is installed. That can save you a few seconds, but this one obviously was not. So what systat will do, take a look at the SAR command. The SAR command will collect information about your system, such as like CPU usage, memory usage. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that you can get out of SAR, and I'm not going to dig into every little thing here. But what I think you might be asked to do on the exam, and of course, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you anyway because of NDA. This is just my guess. Is by default SAR. For REL 8 and 9, it will make a systemd timer. I think for REL 7 and older, it makes a cron job, but it will collect information every 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, I don't think the timer is enabled by default. No, it is not. But if I were to do systemctl status sys, let me do this. I don't want to list all of that. List, unit, files, grep. Okay, it's the systat collector timer is what I'm wanting. So it is enabled, but it is not started. So we're going to systat collect.timer. If I could type the right letter, that would be helpful. And we see that in 9 minutes, it's going to run. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to edit this to run every minute. So should be able to edit. Really, that's not what I want to do, nor do I want to use nano. So what is this? Control X. What this would do is basically make another unit configuration file that will also be read for the timer. But what I would rather do is this. Let me do cat, because that should tell me where this is. There we go. Notice it will wanted by the service, and we are going to edit just this file. We're going to change this from every 10 minutes to every 1 minute. Do a daemon reload, and I'm going to restart the timer. Okay, so we're going to wait just a couple of minutes, let it do its thing, and then we'll see what the results are. So we're wanting to monitor systems for vital characteristics. Other tools you could do for this, top command for looking at processes and memory consumption and such. Free command will do that as well. There's IOstat, which this Some of these I wish I have tinkered more with. Let's do IOstat, see what happens. Yeah, that gives us some information about your disk usage and such. You have the SS command that shows you. I like using TCP UDP list, process ID, and the number. Shows you what's open. I use SS all the time. If you're wanting to monitor file changes, there is a tool called aide for that. I guess I could demonstrate that as well. Do that real quick. So this is one I have not used in production, and I guess if you did this, you would set up like a cron job to send an email or something if there's a change. But the way we'll go ahead and install aide on this DNF. I'm trying to remember what it stands for. It's like advanced. It might tell us in the man pages. It basically monitors files and directories. Advanced intrusion detection environment. So we'll create making a configuration file. This at is how you define variables. Tells you where the database file is. I'll go over that in a moment. But what you can do, and this is an example of one of those like well-documented configuration files. This I was not expecting. I was expecting it to look for like permissions, gather what inode information is, size, all of that. Is this all extra hashes? All right, so, that's kind of neat. There's a little alias for everything. Was that set up here? No, it was not. So this everything rule is doing R plus all extra hashes. So R is all of this, and then the all extra hashes equals all these various little hashes. Let's see, normal. All right, so that's setting up sets of permissions. Okay, so things that are in boot, it is checking all of these different little attributes. Okay, that makes sense. And so what happens with aide? If you initialize it, and this takes a couple of minutes, especially if you have a ton of files, which is good because it gives SAR some time to do its thing. And I guess we can look at Cockpit again to see what type of activity has been going on, since this is, I'm sure, chewing up some CPU on my little underpowered VMs. And so what this will do is create basically the database that aide is going to use. So what we need to do is, we can just rename it if we want, take away the new. And so aide is set. And if I were to run aide check, it should tell us that everything is good, nothing has changed. Famous last words in IT, of course, are should. Maybe that's last word, singular. And we see aide found no differences in the database and the file system. All is good. So let us make a change to something. Let's do, all right, so that's read write. Let's change this to 777. Why not? All right, so now we're going to run aide check again, and we should get some type of complaint that something has changed, assuming Etsy is, a part of its configuration and SSSD was within that as well. I should have checked the configuration file first. Oh, good, we got some stuff here. All right, so what it tells us, yeah, this is good. So aide found some differences between database and file system. Yeah, we found a single changed entry, and it tells us what it was before and what we have after for that particular file. So awesome. Now what I'm going to do is change this file back. We're going to run aide check, and I'm curious to see if it will still come up as a problem. Okay, and as I suspected, it didn't come up with any change. Anything has changed because, from the perspective of the database, that file was mode 600 to begin with. So we're going to change it back to 777. And let's say that we want to update the database for aide because we're now expecting this file to be mode 777, and we don't want aide to complain every time. So what we can do is aide update, and what this should do is make a new .new.gz database file. Maybe it didn't actually make it because I had a change. I would think that it did. Yeah, it made the new one. Okay, so what we're going to do is rename the old one, or the current one in production, to old, just in case you need to go back. Probably wouldn't, but just in case. And we are going to change db.new to just db, and we'll do a check, and this should not open file. I was not expecting that. What did I do? All right, so let's see what I did here. Oh, I see what I did. All right, I need to change that .old to .gz. Okay, now let's run a check, and it should not complain about our SSSD configuration set to 777, which of course in the real world you would never do that, but this is just for demonstrating how this works. Going back to the objectives, monitoring changes to the file system. There's a couple of others. Yeah, found no differences, which we expect. I can't remember the name of this tool. Colleague of mine used it for checking if files had changed. I know you can set up a systemd unit if files changed, and that systemd unit will pop off and do whatever it is you want. There was another tool that he used, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. I don't think it was aide. It was a much more automated thing than this. And as far as the exam, I'm not sure how much is actually going to be on aide, because there's another cert for Red Hat, an actual security cert that I think explicitly says do stuff with aide. But some of the trainings that I've done on this mention aide, so I figured have it in front of your head. And it's a pretty nifty tool. It is not super automated, which is okay. You would need to write your rules carefully so you're not getting aide alerts all the time, or anytime you run aide check, you want it to actually find things that you truly are wanting to make sure haven't changed. I think for the exam, I will go over the configuration file a little bit more, because when I was walking through that, it kind of like makes sense to look at, but I don't think I have a full understanding of the concepts behind everything in the configuration. I think I'd be able to make it through objectives and such, but my goal with this and any of my Red Hat certs is, you're trying to learn stuff, and passing the certs, the added bonus, the actually learning of things. And so I don't want this to just be, oh yeah, I sort of know about this, I actually want to learn about it. For various things that you can use for monitoring, again, this can be a very broad thing, but these are some built-in tools that I know of. I did want to take a look at SAR now that this has run a couple of times. There's systat collect. All right, so that should dump stuff. I thought it would dump stuff into a SAR directory. Maybe I don't have anything configured for it. SAR is a great tool that I don't use enough of. Is it sysconfig where that is? Systat, yep. Oh, it puts it in the SA directory. All right, for some reason I was thinking it was SAR. So var log SA, and it's a bunch of binary data that we're not going to be able to use, but we would use the SAR command to view this. I'm just going to do SAR, and as you can see, every minute it has acquired information about CPU usage, and I'm willing to bet that these minutes here are when I was running the aide command. Now, if I were to look at man page for SAR, you can tell it to give you all sorts of information. That's just by default CPU. I think B is going to show you about RAM. Let's see what else. So SAR-B, yep, SAR-D should give us stuff about storage, block devices. SAR is something that I need to play around with between now and the exam. Basically go through the man page and look at the different options, because I could see an objective being something like, all right, so SAR has been running on the system, pull a report for some amount of time. And that is something that at this moment I can't do, because I don't touch it enough. So that will be something to, oh, that's interesting. See, now I'm already distracted from the fact that I'm looking at all this stuff. So that'll be a tool to dig into. Again, I don't know if that's going to be on the exam, because there's nothing here that says monitor systems for vital characteristics using SAR, but I know that's one of the, not built into Rail because you have to install the systat package, but I think a fairly popular tool to be able to do that. So assessment for the exam, I think, and really kind of assessment for the real world, I know some tools to be able to monitor systems for what I would consider vital characteristics like CPU, RAM, network, and disk I/O. And I think I will be able to figure out what needs to be on the, well, what I'd have to deal with on the exam. I did want to look at the performance data in Cockpit. There we go. We got some data here. I guess that's how I didn't think there were little arrows with the other. But we see some memory usage. 557. Yeah, that's about the time that I was doing the aide stuff. Yeah, 6 p.m. There was a spike in disk I/O. So yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Kind of nifty to see that in line. So again, I think I can handle monitoring systems for vital characteristics. So I'm going to consider myself generally prepared. But again, I want to go back and look at aide configuration and pulling some specific reports from SAR, because I think that might be both useful from a system administration perspective and knowing how to use tools, and useful for the exam. So hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, make sure you do click like. I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching, if you haven't subscribed, to click the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when new content is available. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.